Okay, this is the beginning of the butterfly with zinnias. So, I'm going to spritz a little water on here, and I don't want a heavy layer of water, but I do want some moisture in here. And I realize that you can't see how much moisture this is. There's a little droplets pretty much all over, but it's not a solid sheet of water. And I have, let's see if this shows up. I have New Gamboge here, right here. And I'm going to dip straight into the New Gamboge and get, this has been pre-wet, so it's kind of creamy. It's pretty strong paint. So I'm going to start out in the middle of the flower. Basically, we're just putting flower colors in the background. Oops! So I was going to keep the flower color out of the butterfly, mostly out of the butterfly. Well, part of the purpose of this undercolor is also that it helps keep the painting unified. Things don't look like they're cut out and pasted on when they're done like this, because you have some of the colors merging gently in the background. Okay, more. The spatters, and this runs right off the top, and that's very intentional. I have a kind of surprise plan for some of you to see at the end of this. Okay, so if anything, this may be a little stronger than what I wanted. I think I'll add some water to it. It's possible I might blot a little bit. Oh, let's have a paper towel handy. It should be a Vivo, which this is not, because I grabbed it up from wherever I could find it. There. So I'm letting the flower run over into the background. See that? And part of it's running right off the page out onto the table. Okay. Now let's get some, I think I'll get cerulean. And let's see. You know, that might be just all that's there, cerulean with some of that yellow into it. Let's see what happens. That's a real wet spot here. You can see how it really floated around. The picture actually stops right here. And if I leave some white down here at the bottom, that'll give me a place to test out colors later. If I'm unsure about how much is on my brush. When I was new to painting, I had little test pieces of color all over the place. So, and if a little bit of this blue gets into the flower, or see it's going to look a little greenish, that could be good too. I keep forgetting and covering up my test area. There, okay. Now, let's see what we're going to do with this. I'm going to clean up this area right here near the butterfly. Pick up a little more color there. And then, see, and I got a little bit on it there. That's perfectly fine. Not just because I did it. It really is the okay thing to have happen. Maybe I put a little bit more color in. Or maybe I won't. All right, so here's the next thing. This should be wet enough that if you tilt it, some of the paint will flow, and sometimes you can get a really nice effect that way. You can definitely get softer edges. Oh, look at those little, does that show up? Look at those little drips there. Those could be used somewhere, could be really interesting. In fact, if I made a larger painting out of this, those could be interesting right like they are coming down here. Some of this shape is where the paint has hit some of the sprinkles out of the out of the spray bottle, and so it follows the wet track in here. Another thing you could do is, let's just hit it with a little water. Oh, hey, this wasn't what I intended to do, but now this is what I'm doing because it was fun. You should always be having fun with this. If you're stressing out, I want to help you not stress out. So let me know if you're stressing out and I'll tell you to stop, I guess. So over here, I still want soft edges up to the butterfly because I don't want some kind of halo thing like it's going around the butterfly, a light halo. I want it like that background's going behind the butterfly. And if I get a little bit of other color there, it's fine. I just really want the butterfly to be really bright, and so I prefer not to get yellow into it there. So I have a few little white places in here. I call those sparkles, and I prefer to leave them. They're probably going to get covered up before it's over with, but the fact is that sometimes it's a really good effect to have those. So now the next thing I'm going to do is let this set until the sheen goes off. And once there's no shiny spots on it, I can dry it with a hairdryer. Well, I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the other one, and I decided I want a little more color in here than what I've got. I had spritzed this, but it's pretty weak because I spritzed it twice. I should have just spritzed once. Let's just pick up a little more cerulean. This is still on the wet side. May not be quite wet enough. Oh, I'm getting close to the butterfly. Let's see. And don't necessarily need a lot of color everywhere in the background. I just thought that I could have done a little more. Maybe like that. And then what I'm going to do is, that's real soft there. This is pretty soft. That's not so good there. Let's give it a squirt from the side. Whoa, that's too much squirt. Okay, and then the other thing was to have a paper towel handy. Ah. Okay, well, at least I got the right kind of paper towel this time. Viva. Yeah. I'll just put a little of that into that flower. This one's going to be back further back and behind that one. And so if it has a little bit of color that makes it a little duller, we'll just go ahead and get some of that in now. Okay, this is all soft in here. I don't mind a few little crisp edges as long as the paint is relatively pale so they don't stand out too much. I think I'll break some of this edge up a little bit. There. Now I'm happier. I still like the original one better. I think I had a little bit more of something else in there. I think I had a little bit of phthalo green in there. Do you see how I can keep adding little bits of stuff and playing with this? As long as it's pretty wet, you can do a lot of things with it. And even if it's not pretty wet, sometimes it just depends. You have to kind of know what's going to do what. But I could play with this. I got a little bit of phthalo green into my blue because it just has a little more. I just want a little more life in that background. This isn't the completed background, but I'm not going to paint a bunch of leaves back there. I'm going to hopefully suggest them without making them. So a little more phthalo up there. Oh, yeah. Oh, I feel better already. Not much. Phthalo green is very staining. It's it can be downright vicious, and you don't want to get it under your fingernails. You'll have to stay out of away from fancy department store counters for a week if you do. So you can see how I'm just playing with this. This isn't necessarily what you need to do with yours, but I'm just showing that you can continue to play with it while it's drying. In part because this, if anything, I want some texture in the background. Because if you keep playing with it, at some point you will start getting some texture. Yeah, and I like that. I like that area. I like this area. And I've got a little more color there. It's going to be weaker when it dries, but that's a nicer start. Maybe I'll just put a little bit more color. Oops, this doesn't show. There. Maybe I'll put just a little bit more color up in this top edge. Well, a little more than that. Okay. And because I'm actually running this off the edge, I have a plan for it. So you're going to keep these edges just like this. All right. A little bit is creeping into the butterfly. I'm good with that. The main body of the butterfly is still white. Well, I forgot something, so we're going to do that now before we go any further with painting. And that is I was going to mask some of these little stamen thingies in here. And this isn't going to look quite like the flower because I just happen to like it better this way. So I've got a little stylus here and my PBO masking fluid, which I like. In part, it's a little easier to do fine things with this. It's also colored, so I can see exactly what I've done. Sometimes when you unmask something, it's a bit of a surprise because you don't realize how much it's going to show up. Sometimes people aren't very careful about some of the masking they do. Putting a few little dots in here too because they just read like, you know, little bits of organic stuff. So let's put one more bit up here over the butterfly. You notice I brought these all the way down to these petals right here, so that it looks like they go down into the center behind the petals. All right, so we're going to give that a couple minutes to dry. Okay, I'm going to show a couple of ways of working with this. Let's see. I have a small round brush here that I could use. I also have a 1/2 inch flat. The difference between a round and a flat is that rounds tend to hold more water in the center. Sometimes, if you're new to this, that could be a little harder to control. A flat, it works pretty well on small areas. It's a little easier to control the water. However, one of the problems is that some people will work too dry with this. So I'm going to show a separate way of utilizing a flat that might work if you're especially if you're new to this. I have, let's see, does the jar show here? No. Here? Ah. Okay, if I put the jar right up here, you can see what I am doing with the brush. So I got the brush really wet to start out with. I sort of primed it with water. And then I'm going to rake the extra water off of it to use it. However, before we get to that part, here's the other thing. when I'm getting my paint up out of my wells. Let's see, let's turn this and that'll show. Okay. When I'm getting my paint up out of my wells, it's preferable to use a flat. Simply because you're not going to damage the tip on your round. If you use a flat, they just tend to, it's less likely that you're ever going to damage them. You can, but it's less likely. All right. Also, a brush that is really soft. This is a pretty soft brush. A brush that is really soft is less easily damaged than one that's got stiffer hairs. Stiffer hairs tend to get bent. The soft hairs just flex and they don't get damaged as easily. Okay, so I have got New Gamboge out here. That's the yellow that we used. That's the yellow that we used in here. And then I'm going to put a little bit of red with it. I'll just go ahead and use Quinacridone Rose. So you can see that I have a very little bit of rose here, because a little rose goes a long ways. And there I have a lovely orange, and I still have some yellow over here. Maybe I'll just leave it like that. I might eventually want some light colored orange, or we'll see. We'll see. But I have choices of what to pick. Now this is color that you might call a creamy consistency, and it's relatively strong in pigment, but with less water. The more water that is mixed with the watercolor, the faster it flows. Duh. Yeah, but that's something to think about when you're working here. All right, so I'm going to have to set this aside, so you won't be able to see it, but you will be able to, let's see, I could move this down, so you will be able to see where I'm getting the water out. So I'm going to wash this brush out, and I'm going to just rake it a little bit on the side of the jar. I've got a drip there, so I'm going to get the drip off with a paper towel. I don't want the drip on the ferrule to run down. Then I've got a small, this is a really small brush here. Okay, and I'll just rake it once. And I'm picking up my color. I better show you this part too. I am loading up my color on the brush. I might take a little extra off there. We'll see. Let's see how that works. But, okay, what I'm not doing is, I'm not taking my brush and just touching the end of it into the paint. Not for what we're doing here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to come in, let me explain. One of the things about painting a flower is you either can see the center, or you know where the center is when you're looking at the flower. That's how you make sense out of it. Generally, if you can't tell where the center of the flower is, it's a lot harder, not only for you to keep track of as you're painting, but for the viewer to make sense out of it. This flower has got yellows on the backs of some petals and on the fronts of some petals. It's got a yellow and an orange back, and in some places it appears that it has a yellow back with an orange front. I don't know, and I don't really care, as long as you have this sense that the center, that all of these are pointing into the center, you're okay. And one way to do that is to get it a little darker at this end of the petal than you do at the tip of the petal. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out where the petal comes into the center of the flower. We're going to start out with paint there. And then I've got two options. Let's do this one first for a while. I'm taking my brush and I'm raking off the extra water. And because this is a small brush, that is probably adequate. I could probably come in here and get this wet. And oh, I think color's not moving much there. I think I could use a little more orange. So I'll come over here and pick up a little bit more orange. I'm going to start back there again and pull it this way into the water. There. Now, I have an orange edge right here, which it wouldn't hurt to just leave it like that. But I can come in and dampen that edge a little more. And then I'll just have that soft blend from the pointing from the center and coming out this way and getting lighter as I go. And that's what I'm going to do with most of these petals. Just, you could almost paint a flower this way without even looking at the original. We should pay some attention to the original, but don't get so caught up in that you're fighting to see what all is going on in here, because this flower is a little bit confusing to look at. All right, so I'm picking up color again, and I'll skip a petal so that this can be drying. So the first petal can dry so they don't run together, although there are times when it doesn't hurt if the petal does run together. So here, I do have this little tip that is curving up, so you're seeing the back side of the petal. At least that's what I think it is. The picture is pretty fuzzy. It's a little hard to tell. So I'm getting water, and now I want to rake a lot of water off of this one because I don't have much area there. Let's just see what it's going to do here. And here, I don't want to fade it all the way out because I'm going to leave that little yellow tip. Okay. Now let's come over and let's pick up another one, and we'll come here and do this one. And this one kind of fades into the background, and I'm going to let it do that. Oh, I don't have enough water on my brush to blend that out. Well, I better dip back in. Just barely touch it and take a tiny drip off of it. Let's see what this does. Almost always you have to adjust a little bit. Okay, well that's just not quite enough color. And that looks greenish. I think I'm going to pick up a little bit of the part that's mostly yellow with a little bit of orange in it. Well, that still looks pretty orange. And I'm going to pull a little color all the way up here. But I want it to get lighter. Okay, like that. If I got more color down there than I wanted, which I didn't, but if I had, I could just take my paper towel and give it a little blot. In fact, we will. We'll pull a little bit up. There we go. So don't be afraid that your paper towel is your painting tool. You can use it both to modify the amount of water on your brush, or you could use it to blot sometimes. There are times to blot and times not to blot, but on this flower, blotting is perfectly fine. So let's come over here and let's pick up a little more color. These petals are going up. So this is the bottom part of the petal right here where it connects to the flower. So I'll do that. And then I think I'll do a little bit on this one over here. One of the things you want to be careful about is not to start to mass produce. You do not want to get on an assembly line. You want to basically do one petal at a time, but these are two short petals, so I think that it will be pretty easy to do two here. One will run into the other. What I'll do is, see, I've got the heel of my hand. I don't know if that shows. I've got the heel of my hand down on the paper, and so on the table, and so I can steady my hand real easily. I'm washing my brush out. Might even take a little extra water out of it. We'll see if that worked right or not. Whoa. I'm going to just pull a little bit of color over there. I'm just barely touching the paper with this brush. I am not pressing down at all because I'm not putting the color on the paper. I'm letting it flow off my brush onto the paper. And a real gentle touch is a real advantage. Sometimes this is a little harder for guys to do just because they tend to be a little heavier handed. This one, it's going to be dark down this way. And then I'm going to rake a little water off my brush. It's easiest if you can work so that you approach the wet paint with the tip of your brush. See, like this, and your hand is on the far side of it. I've squeezed my brush out, and I might just pull up a little extra water and paint right there. Okay, let me do that again, explain, because you can see this petal right here. The easiest way, especially if you're beginning this, but I frequently do it this way anyway, especially if I'm using a round. Okay, see, I'm raking just a little of the water off of here. Oh, I got quite a bit of water on my brush this time. I saw that come off. I'm going to just sneak up on the edge here and see how much paint flows. My paint is thick enough here, the mixture that I've got mixed in the tray is thick enough that it's not flowing very much. So that means that I can come on into it and pull some of it this way. Sometimes you won't need to do that. Sometimes it will just flow out because it's not quite as thick, but this is a little bit thicker. You won't always know until you do it and you see how it reacts on the paper. So don't give yourself a bad time if it doesn't go just the way you think it should. This is a matter of understanding the paint and making an adjustment. So here we go again. Now I've got another way of blending that out, and that would be to take the flat brush and just come to the edge and pull it out. This is a little bigger brush, so it's actually letting down a little bit more water. But in general, a flat brush is just a little easier to blend with. Let's see, let's find, oh, here's another one. So that is a possibility that you might want to use. Again, now that I've been working with my paint, I happen to know that if I'm working with this size brush and the paint that I have mixed right now, I know that it is probably not going to flow out very fast, and that will be a little easier for me to handle because it's not flowing real fast. I can just come up here and get into it a little bit and pull it, and it's pretty easy to handle. If everything is too wet, let me do one that's too wet. Let's see, let's get a really wet mixture over here, and let's come in. Where do I want to come in that's dry? Oh, let's go back. This should be dry enough over here now. This is a wetter mixture. I just add a little water to it. So I've got a wetter mixture. And when I add water to this, it's going to flow into that water. See how that flows in there more quickly? I'm not getting as much color as I wanted in it though. So I'm going to go back and add some of my thicker stuff in. All I'm saying is that be prepared to adjust, and once you get it adjusted, it will what you're doing will kind of level out and you won't have as much trouble with it. I've already got quite a bit of water there. I think I'll just leave that like that. Yeah, I kind of like what's happening here. Let's look at this one. We have got the dark inside. Now I'm going to take a little bit that has mostly yellow in it with just a little less red. Well, not much. I'm putting it right along the bottom there. And here I'm working in a very small space, so I want to be sure. See, I'm coming up from the outside. I want to be sure that I don't let much water down into the space. Now, you can see how that is curving up. That's all I had to do to make it curve up. It was pretty easy. Okay. Okay, one more and I'm going to stop. Okay, wash my brush out. You notice I'm doing a good job of washing the brush. And that's because I want clean water. If it's still got a lot of paint on it, then I'm not going to get the results I need. I left a little more water in my brush that time. Oh, that did pretty well. That worked really well. Okay. So I think that's a pretty good example of what we're doing here. So I'm going to stop the video and send it out.